Well, hello there. I'm Mindy, and today I'm here with Melinda Schwartz, and she is a friend of mine. She's going to share with us today. She's worked with kids and families for over 20 years with different types of counseling and different resources in different capacities. Currently, she's working at the Friendship Counseling Center?
Friends Counseling
Center. So she's here today because we've been talking the last couple of weeks, Nick and Joe have, about some anxiety, and the church has done a series on that. So we just want to keep dripping out some things for parents about some just anxiety and how do you talk to your kids about those things. And one of the best ways to start the conversation, because you don't want to start a conversation about anxiety when your child is 14 or 15. You never want to have that be the first time you talk about it. So talking about emotions from when kids are really little is super important. Mm-hmm. And so that's called developing an emotional vocabulary. So Melinda's going to share her expertise with us today. And so why is that emotional? What is an emotional vocabulary, and why is it important?
So emotional vocabulary is basically just, it's having words to describe how you're feeling. Some of the benefits of it are that the better able a person is to identify their feelings, the better able they are to control them, to work through them, manage them. We all know the Bible very clearly states that feelings can be deceptive. And so when we understand our feelings, we're better able to understand where they're coming from, and then understand when they're healthy, when they're not healthy, when they're accurate, when they're inaccurate, like when our feelings are lying to us or not. So having that vocabulary, having words to give to our emotions. And a lot of times people, the go-to emotions are
mad,
sad,
happy. So that's about it.
Yeah.
For little ones, you know.
And sometimes even teenagers that I work with at the counseling center, I'll have them list off feeling words that they can come up with. And a number of the teenagers that I work with, and they're teenagers who are honor students, they're good kids who are having a lot of emotional problems, they're kids who go to church. They're having emotional problems, they're in counseling, but they're not behavioral problems. They can name maybe 5 feelings total. And one website I was looking at before I came here, Mindy, was they had like 25 feeling words that started with the letter A alone.
So we need to expand those vocabularies for sure. And, because you don't want a 2-year-old, like a 2-year-old, you think of a temper tantrum, right? They're usually because they can't express that I'm hungry or that I'm hangry or what, but you don't want that when they're 8. You want them to start to be able to think, and you don't want it for sure when they're 20. Like just, so that vocabulary, like she said, to control that emotion, to know it, you can't control it or deal with it if you don't know what it is. So
you bring up another point. This might be a little bit of a sidebar, but feelings are physical. They're not just emotional. And so things like when we're hangry, there's a reason that word has come about. But there's also, when you get angry, you feel the tightness in your muscles, in your arms or your stomach. When you feel anxious, people often get headaches or upset stomachs. You have that butterfly.
Nervous before something even good, that adrenaline. I've
had people use the word buzzing. I feel like my body is buzzing. And I was able to know, I was like, oh, I know the sensation they're talking about. Yeah. And so as you develop an emotional vocabulary, you can also connect the physical, which helps create just, again, more understanding of what's going on.
Yeah. Especially for younger who are concrete, like a younger child, like, I see your hands are in fists. Mm-hmm. You might be angry. They don't have the word themselves, or, but you can help them realize that their body's reacting to their feeling sometimes.
It is. And with younger kids and that body connection, with Ethan and with some of the families I worked with, we would do the If You're Happy and You Know It song, but we would use different emotions and we would attach it to physical actions. So if you're sad and you know it, cry real hard. If you're mad and you know it, growl real loud.
Daniel Tiger.
Yeah. If you're angry and you know it, clench your fist. Because then it starts connecting. Oh, my body is doing, because sometimes kids can recognize what their body's doing, but they don't know the feeling attached to it. So when you can connect those two,
That's helping build that vocabulary.
yes.
For them. So
Yeah.
so we need to develop it, and she explained why. So now can you give us some hints besides just singing? Now you've started to do that, but what are some other ways? So no matter what age our children are, as they grow, we still need to continue to develop. If there's 24 words just for the letter A for emotions, obviously as they get older, we need to continue those types of conversations. So what are some ways we can help our kids at different ages?
Well, I would say one of the first things is we need to label our own feelings. Yeah, Mindy just grimaced. That's a lot of fun to do. But if we're not aware of our own feelings, if we're not naming them or modeling that for our children, it's going to be a lot harder for us to teach them to do that. So having our own awareness is a really great place to start. Little kids, it is stick with simple. You don't need 25 feeling words for, children under the age of 5. You probably only need 3 or 4 for our toddlers and our little guys. And then as they get bigger, start expanding. What's the difference between mad and angry, or frustrated?
Yeah. What's the difference between nervous and worried eventually?
Yes. And then even in that, what is boredom? And anger and boredom and depression can easily feel very similar. So I think, with little kids singing, with older kids, helping them name their own feelings, that needs to start from their little and then can kind of continue. But then it also asking them, then if you're watching a show together, if you're reading a book together, asking questions like, what do you think that person was feeling? What does that expression mean? Or, getting them to recognize facial expressions of characters or photos. Yeah, when you're reading a book. There is that early elementary age that you're probably going to need to give some prompts like, oh, that child looked sad. Why do you think they're sad?
Mm-hmm. Or could you even reverse that? I noticed that person, they got a bad grade on their test and they were walking with their shoulders down. What emotion, so calling out what you see to help versus just always the emotion first, is that okay to do either way? Yeah,
that's perfect. Okay. Either way. Doing both of those is really great, when you're able to remember. We all forget things.
So I'm hearing lots of conversation.
Yes.
So this isn't parents, this isn't a one and done, sometimes I like a checklist and I've talked to them about this today, I've prayed with them today, I've done this, good, that's not one of those. This is a constant, continual, things are going to change, emotions are going to change, just.
And I will say, as kids get into upper elementary and then junior high and high school, they're not going to probably want you labeling their feelings in the middle of their feelings.
Done that, it doesn't work.
Waiting until they have a point where they can come to you and have that conversation. And again, if you've built this groundwork of being able to talk about feelings and where they come from, and if all feelings are okay, how we handle them is not always okay, but having the feeling is okay, then it makes it easier as they get older to come back and talk about, I was really angry, my feelings. And that's with anger especially. What's under anger? We're always angry because of other feelings. A question I like to ask people a lot is, it seems like something got stepped on. What got stepped on that made you angry? And sometimes it's my pride. Sometimes it's they made fun of me and I was embarrassed. And so that can help as well.
Yeah, that helps get to the root, because you always want to, if you're hoping to point them back to the Lord and back to what the Bible says about emotions. Like, you have to recognize it, but then also finding what the truth is. So finding the cause of that anger, and then how do I deal with the cause, is so important. So that then you can find and point them to the verses, to the truth, to that.
Another question I like to ask, and this is a little bit more for upper elementary and beyond, but what evidence do you have to support that? Like because
Testing question.
because when they're particularly when they're talking about being worried or mad or angry, those sorts of things, it often goes back to, well, everybody hates me. Okay, well, what evidence do you have for that? Rather than arguing with them, because if you're able to remember back to your own junior high school years, that was,
and when you ask a question, you're activating the top part of the brain again and getting them out of the emotion brainstem answer and helping connect to where they can actually think.
Right.
Which is important.
And kids don't like to be told, like older kids don't like to be told what they're thinking or feeling. So leaving those, well, why do you think nobody likes you? And then they get into that bigger part of the brain, more thinking, and then they're like, oh, my feelings are deceiving me.
Right. So just, it's going to be lots of conversations.
Lots of conversations.
But intentional conversations. There's going to be ones that pop up in the everyday moments in the car and after school. Always be prepared for something, right? Because you don't know how their day went. But also just be thinking as parents, how do we intentionally start some of these conversations? So Melinda has some other resources that we'll put in the comments, just some feeling.
There's a feeling chart, and it starts with the basic feelings, and then it expands out into other words that are connected to those baseline emotions, and just some other things like that.
Yeah, so we'll put some of those in the comments so you can see those. But thank you for.
I forgot one thing. I wanted to mention Botox face.
Oh yes. Okay. So with Botox, that's cheap. Just do the face. So
yes.
Explain this. This is good.
So this is more again early or late elementary, upper elementary, junior high school kids. But that studies have shown that teenagers misread emotions approximately 50% of the time. And and their default is anger. So if you have kids who are you're always yelling at me, you're always mad at me, it's because their go-to often is anger. And so Botox face, it's that you can't move your eyebrows, limiting, it's poker face.
Poker face, yeah. So just try to be in the heat of that moment, or when they're just
as neutral looking as possible, so that you don't create another unintentional barrier.
Right. Okay, so practice that in the mirror tonight. So thank you for sharing with us. If you have other questions, I'm sure Melinda's happy to answer them. She's a great resource and very willing to share what God has taught her and shown her to help others. So thank you. We hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll talk to you later.